Hello and welcome. This is Terry Roberts with DMAI, Destination Marketing Association International, and we are the trade association for Convention and Visitors Bureaus. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar again this month, and we are prepared today to talk about 5 ways to avoid a half-room block. And we look forward to an interesting discussion. I have on board today my cohort at DMAI, Christine Shimasaki, or Shimo. Hey, Shimo.
Good morning. How are you, Terry?
I'm good, and just let me tell everyone that they can enter any questions that they may have during the webinar. We'll be watching the question panel during the course of the webinar. And then also we would like to welcome Chris Blezel with ePro Direct, our monthly webinar sponsor, and we'll give Chris a little opportunity to talk to our audience at the end of the webinar.
Well, thank you, Terry. And I am joined today by Lisa Astorga, Director of Meetings for the International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis. So, hi, Lisa.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be with you and hope everyone is having a great morning and afternoon.
Well, you know, Lisa, I know you're headed out shortly probably being tomorrow morning, right, for your annual meeting to be held in Paris.
Yes, absolutely.
Montpellier?
In Montpellier, right outside of Paris. And yes, it is tomorrow. And it's becoming one of our best meetings.
I tell you, we are especially grateful that you're able to carve out some time, you know, to be with us the day before. I'm not sure how many of our meeting planners would be doing the same thing as committing to a webinar the day before they're leaving. But Lisa, you know, let me tell them a little bit about you. So not only do they know that you have exceptional time management skills, but Lisa has really been with association management and been a meeting professional for well over 15 years. And in Lisa's current role with the society, she is really tasked with further professionalizing and standardizing ISTH's congresses and overseeing the long-term meeting strategy and being an advocate for the overall meeting experience, which impacts the society's meetings. So Lisa, I know you handle meetings that attract between 1,500 and up to maybe even 10,000 attendees all around the world, as well as a number of smaller education courses. And I have known Lisa with PCMA as she's volunteered for a number of the industry's associations committees. And she also serves as an advisory board member for some of our CVBs. So perhaps, like many of you who have joined us today, Lisa has just about seen or experienced every issue around event conceptualization to execution and then back to conceptualization. So her experience includes budget and finance management and coordination with local organizing committees, partnering vendors, and she likes to put an emphasis on keeping up with industry trends. So this whole discussion of contracted room blocks is right up your alley, isn't it, Lisa?
Oh, absolutely. And this topic is always dynamic, and it always seems to be on the forefront of trends. And we see many trends in this regard, you know, whether it's hotel contract clauses or pirates and poachers, or the incorporation of new trends like we're seeing now with AirBnBs. But while there are many things that change, there are so many things that remain the same.
And one of those things that has remained the same over the years is that perhaps attendees are booking outside the contracted room block. So let me give us a little view about what we'll be talking about this morning. And in our roadmap, first, you know, let me frame our discussion. We're going to start with the results of the event room demand study, which of course will beg the question, will room blocks become a thing of the past? Which will then, we'll ask our audience to sort of weigh in on voting on what you think, so please stay tuned to participate in our poll. And then we'll identify, you know, why we need to still be concerned about the room block and why they still matter. And then we'll wrap up with 5 things specifically that you can do about avoiding a half-empty room block and on all the risks that go with that. So, Lisa, are you ready?
Absolutely. Let's get this very interesting topic started.
Okay, so let me frame about what we know. And what we know is that in this example, we might have a lot of attendees attending our event, like 5,700, just to use a number. But then we have only 2,200 rooms being picked up in a contracted room block. So what we haven't known is that really how many rooms does our event really use? What is the overall room demand? And that's been the question. And we've answered that question this last year with a study that really addresses how many rooms does your event really use. And the findings of that study, Lisa, has really shown that 1 out of every 3 rooms are being booked outside the contracted room block. And go ahead, Lisa.
No. I continue. I was going to jump in with my questions and comments, but I want you to finish.
Well, you know, it's just that 1 out of every 3 is overall average, right? But, you know, what we've also found is that all of our events are so different. So when we look at the distribution of those events, about 174 events were analyzed, and that was like 880,000 zip codes being analyzed. We find that in some cases, some of the events have less than 20% going around the room block, and that's about 1/3 of the events analyzed. But on the high side, you can see that there are many events where there's 40, 60, 80% of the rooms being booked outside the contracted room block.
Yeah, and Shimo, I think as you mentioned, what I found particularly interesting is though, while 1 out of 3 is for all events, for citywide events, based on your information, that figure is closer to 45% of the rooms are contracted outside the block. I mean, that's staggering numbers.
It's like almost 50%. I mean, and that's really getting, you know, I think our attendees are really looking for other accommodations. So here's the question, right? And I want our audience to get prepared to vote. But here's the question: are room blocks, are they here to stay, or are they really going to become a thing of the past? So I have launched this poll, and love for each of you to weigh in on whether or not you think that room blocks, are they going to be here to stay, or are they going to become a thing of the past? Okay, so it looks like everyone has weighed in, so I'm going to close the poll, and then I'm going to share the results with you. And here you have it. 75% of you that participated today have voted that they're here to stay. So does that surprise you, Lisa?
No, it doesn't surprise me. I think, and I like that model, particularly for the U.S. I think there's many reasons why room blocks are here to stay in the U.S. model. Certainly a little different for the international model, but that's a topic for another day. But again, I think there's many reasons, and 2 fundamental reasons why I believe, like most of the people in the poll here, that the room blocks are here to stay. And the first reason centers around the business model, which is completely independent of our attendees' behavior. We look at this from our organization standpoint. Because the attendee is not bearing the brunt of the business model, we are as planners and host organizations. That business model focuses on the value of room blocks, and therefore is a requirement of space. We all need our space. We all look at it that way, whether it's the convention center and we're working with the bureau to block rooms so that we can get our convention center either inexpensive or in some cases free, or we're working with our hotel partners to block a certain amount of rooms to acquire our space. I think the principle is still the same.
So, Lisa, if you have a poor track record, meaning, you know, you don't pick up the rooms in your contracted room block, then this business model is really impacted by the amount of space you reserve into the future, because hotels are sort of looking and cities are looking at your track record. So
that's
room
right.
blocks are here to, so room blocks are really here to stay, because this business model really shows no sign of changing. Even, though a third, or in some cases nearly half of our attendees are finding other accommodations.
Right, and that's exactly right, and that's why this is so important to be able to accurately detect what your room pickup it is. The second fundamental reason room blocks are here to stay is all about protecting the attendee experience. Our attendees trust us. Our members trust us that if we put a room block out there and they book a room in that hotel in a city that they're not familiar with, that they're going to get a quality room. I mean, last month's webinar on site inspections was popular for a reason. As planners, we have a responsibility to vet all the accommodations before we include them in our block. Obviously, these pictures may be a little extreme. I'm not sure we're putting any of those rooms on the left there in our room block, but we also have to think about the attendee experience. And when they're unable to find rooms because of competing destination events or other more lucrative consumers of hotel rooms, we have to make sure that we have the rooms blocked for them that our attendees trust us to block and are comfortable with.
So planners may not think about the fact, Lisa, that their event may actually have to compete for hotel rooms, and they don't have adequate blocks to make sure that there isn't too much friction for their attendees' decision to attend. We don't want to put that barrier up. So I think planners are all probably nodding their heads and understand, but they really are looking maybe what they can do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we shouldn't keep the reasons to book inside the block a secret. Sometimes we forget as planners that we need to get this information out, and we can start with our leadership. There's an understanding of why we need these room blocks. I think we operate under so many assumptions and forget about the fact that our room blocks need to be actively marketed. Again, this is a senior level discussion that we need to have internally and externally. And it may require some different marketing communications and changes in our registration policies. It's our responsibility as the meeting planner to let our teams look at this differently, to bring a different approach to the table. So again, as a planner, you should expect that this is part of your responsibility. And also, it's important that you declare what's the right behavior for booking. Anything short of a declaration is essentially passively communicating that it's really okay to go outside the block. So that communication with your leaders and your attendees is essential.
So what you're saying is that we really need to influence the right behavior, not only through education, but really back that up with maybe some potential policy changes. I've seen where planners have, the policy change has been to tie registration and the housing process together, and formally tie those together, where there may be a financial incentive, or you might look at it as a disincentive, to book outside the contracted room block versus inside.
And that's right, Shimo. And for many of us that attend PCMA convening leaders, we see that model. And it's worked successfully for PCMA for quite a few years now, where there's a discount on your registration if you stay within the contracted room block.
I think that number two is somewhat of a paradigm shift. Traditionally, I think we thought of the cutoff date as really the end of your housing process. And what we're saying is that it really shouldn't be. If you're in the hotel reservation business, then you really always need to let your attendees know to come to you for their housing needs. So attendees, Lisa, they don't really understand what cutoff date means. They just need a hotel and they want to attend your conference. So let's not create friction from their ability to do so. So,
yeah. And Shibo, this is really very interesting. It's not something currently that my society practices, but I'm very intrigued by it. So how do planners continue to sell when their room blocks have closed?
Yeah,
do you have some advice on that?
That's a great question. So first, the reason why the 30-day cutoff exists in your contracted room block is because hotels don't want to be left holding, unoccupied rooms, and they don't want to be held that responsibility, so close to their arrival date. So it doesn't give them adequate, time for them to resell the room. So after cutoff date, the hotel, what's remaining inventory is released. So the practice that is contemporary today is that the housing companies or even reservation companies like ARES Travel, ARES Travel, what they do is they continue the booking process after cutoff. And what they're selling is not your contracted room block because that's been released, but they're selling general hotel room availability that anyone else could find on hotels.com, for example. And the benefit is that if you continue to take care of their housing needs through either the housing company or through ARES Travel, then you get that tracking. And it may even, this type of tracking may even help you, depending upon your negotiated contracts, really avoid some attrition charges. So really the moral of the story is that don't let the cutoff date stop you from really continuing to sell your rooms.
Interesting. So for number 3, I thought perhaps this might be a no-brainer, and then I realized that many planners do not segment their email marketing list to separate the past attendees who have never booked inside the contracted room block versus those who do. As they say, data is king, and we have this information. So we know who they are, and they should receive special marketing communications. Again, it's working internally with all your teams, especially your marketing team. And going back to our point number 1, which is not to keep the reasons to book inside the block a secret, you especially don't want to eliminate or exclude this group. And you want to do special marketing to them to get your message out.
That's a great point. So on number 4, perhaps we can probably do a whole webinar just on this topic alone. But we really need to be proactive about the fact that there will be pirates and poachers impacting our room blocks. The Convention Industry Council's APEX initiative, has had a room block poaching work group, and they created this great toolkit for meeting professionals to help them combat the real complex issues of piracy and poaching. So, piracy is really about actively, companies out there who are looking to really divert your attendees and exhibitors away from booking inside the room block and into other hotel bookings. So they did a survey, this work group, of over 600 meeting professionals, and it was reported that 73% have had their events targeted by pirates.
Simo, that number is staggering, and I suspect it could even be higher, that some people don't even know they're being targeted by poachers. They have no idea, and maybe attendees are just booking with them and don't know that it's not a part of the official block. So what can we do? I think there's 2 key strategies for dealing with pirates and poachers. One is educate your participants about these deceitful practices. Again, they may not even know that they are not on the official site. And if you find a poacher or a pirate, send a cease and desist letter to the offenders immediately when you identify them. I know that I have worked with some groups before, and it may take 1 or 2 times sending the letter, but it's very effective.
So we highly encourage the planners on the webinar today to obtain this toolkit because it contains, it really gives you some great sample cease and desist letters to use, and it also gives you sample messaging that you could proactively send to your attendees and exhibitors and sponsors. So you can go to conventionindustry.org to download the toolkit, but we will certainly provide you a link to this resource in our follow-up email to you. So finally, Lisa, our final suggestion.
Yeah, so our final suggestion, which we mentioned in the beginning, I think, but it's worth repeating again, is to constantly be aware of local factors that impact the hotel occupancy where you're going, in the city you're going. Don't ignore events that are affecting that occupancy. You know, there may be a new meeting coming in, or there may be a sporting event, something, anything that will impact your occupancy. You need to keep the pulse on what's going on, and the best way to do this is make sure you're always partnering with your Convention and Visitors Bureau. They're the best source of your information on these types of things.
You know, Lisa, that's a good point. So the CVB is your local advocate, you know, for your meeting, and the communication should really be both ways. The CVBs should keep you constantly informed about local events as they occur, and that could be from a local marathon that gets organized, or even last-minute cancellations that are affecting the hotel inventory. But in addition, your CVB should, you know, really be arming the hotels with how your registration, you know, pace is doing compared to previous years, so everyone can kind of stay, you know, in sync with how to best serve your attendees and your needs. So speaking of CVBs, I want to turn that back over to Terry, who could help us really understand how to get connected to the CVBs.
Thanks, Shimo and Lisa. I really enjoyed listening to you. I think for planners who are trying to better figure out this whole room block management, you really offered some effective tips. And if a planner out there who is engaged with us today would like an easy way to connect with the Convention and Visitors Bureau in their destination, we have 158 DMOs who are vested in the meetings marketplace, all aggregated at empowerMINT.com. So that means as their trade association, we have brought them all together to be convenient to you in one web portal as opposed to you having to go to many to find them. So we hope that you will visit us there. And then additionally, I know that everyone has questions about their CMP credits. So you have earned a half an hour today of CMP Domain H under Site Management, and you will be receiving your certificate along with a recording of this webinar probably middle of next week. So please be sure to check your spam. Folks that reach out to us that tell us that they did not receive their certificate usually find it there. So check there, and we look forward to getting that off to you as well. And there are many ways in which you can stay in touch with us. We hope that in addition to visiting the website, you'll connect with us on our LinkedIn group. If you have any specific questions, you can reach us by email. Look for some hopefully other really interesting content on our blog, or listen to one of our podcasts. So I'd like to, as I promised at the beginning, introduce Chris Wessel with ePro. Chris is our monthly webinar sponsor. And Chris, it's always great to have you with us. And while you're speaking to the audience for just a second, Shimo and Lisa are looking at the question board, and then we'll be taking your questions as soon as Chris concludes. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much, Terry, and as always, it's such a pleasure to partner with you guys on these. I mean, every time you seem to hit the nail on the head with just such a wonderful topic, and Lisa and Shimo, you guys did a great job. I spent a little time at the world center throughout my career, and this was always an ongoing issue, especially with kind of a monster hotel like that. It was always had to be watched so closely, and all the challenges you brought up today were were so evident there, and hopefully this will give everybody some suggestions on how to overcome some of those, because I think it affects obviously both the the association of the organization as well as the hotel. But thank you very much for the information. Very thorough. Great job. As Terry mentioned, my name is Chris Wessel. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called eProDirect and Inspire Mobile. We're a 15-year-old hospitality marketing and technology company. Today I wanted to talk briefly about our event apps. Inspire Mobile offers a kind of a handful of different event app solutions based on very, very specific client needs. And we've been developing event apps for about 5 years now, but we recently rebranded and relaunched our new product called Inspire Mobile. We built that product based on feedback from, we did a survey, and we had about a little over 1,000 meeting and conference planners respond to that survey and what they would want in the perfect event app. And we kind of took that and handed it to our technology team and said, build this. So they went ahead and did that and enabled us to now truly accommodate the meeting planning community with a pretty dynamic product. Each app we build is completely custom, and it's very, very targeted to the specific needs of both organizers and their attendees. All the popular modules that you might see in an event app are available, as well as, of course, branding opportunities and revenue-generating opportunities and everything you might have seen from any other competitors out there. So if anybody would like to learn more, you can visit us at eProDirect.com or simply go to inspiremobile.com, and you can get information more specific on our event apps. So thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it once again for allowing us the opportunity to be a partner with you all.
Thanks, Chris. Great person, great company, and we hope our planners will reach out to you. Hey, Shimo, I know that you've been looking at the question board, and you've had quite a few people ask some questions. Do you and Lisa want to address those now?
Sure. I had one question right off the bat. When we started, Lisa, talking about the PCMA model where, you might look to change some policies related to housing and registration, tying them together. So Amy was curious as to how do you tie that together?
Right. So the way that it works for PCMA, and I certainly don't want to speak entirely for them, but when you register for the meeting, I believe registration may have been almost about a $200 discount off the regular registration rate. And you are required then to book in the hotel contracted block. You don't have to book at that time, but what you're allowing them to do is at some point they're going to cross-reference it, and there's a cutoff time, and if you're not in one of the contracted hotels, you will then be charged the additional $200 registration fee. So it doesn't mandate you to do it, but it encourages you to do it, particularly with that type of financial discount.
And
I'm assuming yeah.
I know that through that housing process or to the registration process that you do need to click a box that says you plan to stay outside the contracted room block, and then at that time you get charged the $200 surcharge, or actually, they look at it like an incentive, like you get a $200 discount if you make your housing reservation. But they are, like you said, Lisa, they're doing this cross-referencing, and I know a lot of planners have begun to pick up that process.
Absolutely, and it's working, and they've continued to do it for a few years now, so it is working.
So another question, really asks about, is there a difference between piracy and poaching? And that's a good question. And so while I was able to do a little research because I didn't know that answer right off the bat. And I still don't know the answer because the way Apex addresses this is they address piracy and poaching in the same sentence. They always use an or in that. But so I do not know of a distinction between the two. But,
yeah, I don't know that I do either, Shimo. It may be just interchangeable, the terminology that's being used. I would say the only thing is sometimes poachers may be looking at your room blocks and utilizing them for different events, where pirates may be just trying to get your attendees to book within their block. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think for the most part the terms are used interchangeably.
Yes, and both of them being deceitful at that.
Yeah.
So there's a question from Stephen about what our suggestions might be for tracking the use of AirBnB, their attendees obtaining housing through Airbnb, besides post-conference surveys. And to my knowledge, Stephen, there really isn't. Airbnb is a dynamic issue because in some destinations, Airbnb hosts are actually charging for a room tax, and that room tax is then being supported through additional destination tourism promotion. But I don't know of a way, but I do know that there are some housing companies that are beginning to test the practice of whether or not they can secure a quote-unquote room block with the Airbnb hosts. So that I know is just kind of being experimented with, and I don't know if you have any other insights about that.
I don't at this point. I would think, though, as we move into the future, I don't think that Airbnbs are going to go away. So I think there will be more conversations, potentially through the CVBs, through housing companies, and with Airbnb on this topic.
So stay tuned for that. That could be a potential webinar topic as well.
Absolutely.
Danielle has asked us regarding communicating to attendees, our number 3, Lisa, about communicating to those attendees who've never really booked inside the room block. What kind of messaging would we be sharing with them?
Well, I think it's mainly the points that we talked about today. First off, you want to communicate the advantage for not only themselves in terms of reliability, booking within the block, but what booking within the block means to the society and the potential advantage it is, and how that supplements, maybe you could prove some of these points that supplements some of the Congress costs. So you really want to put out there some good, true, honest information, and I think most people are pretty reasonable and will understand that, but it's communicating that information, the rationale why.
And we've had New York and Company, our CVB there in New York City, and they are putting together actually a communication that they're arming their clients with to send out to their attendees, and they bring up 4 points about why you need to stay in the room block, Lisa. So number 1, it's like you said, it's supporting the association or the host, and they explain that they need to substantiate the rooms in order to secure space in future years. 2 is that they need to take advantage of the all-important networking opportunities. 3 is that that it actually can save the attendee money. And then certainly peace of mind and customer service and being able to take advantage of some of the transportation opportunities that are within the organization's shuttle costs, right? So there are advantages. I think that you need to just kind of think through and brainstorm with your own teams as to what's going to resonate with your attendees.
Yes.
Let's see. Danielle, you had another question regarding, do you build into your contracts the requirement for a pre-event audit, or do you just use the Housing Bureau's rooming list with the hotels?
Well, I think you use any mechanism you can, and certainly it starts with the hotel contract initially. So you want to make sure you have that clause in your contract that you can conduct an audit and what is and isn't included in that audit. And you want to be able to count any rooms made by any mechanism. Again, that's part of your hotel negotiations. Most hotels are really willing to take your registration report and run a dedupe against it. And I would say more times than not, you are going to pick up, it may not be significant, but it's a good piece of your block from those audits.
So Lisa, kind of piggybacking on that, then Kathy has asked us a question, or she's stated that they do have an audit clause within their contract with the hotels to make sure that they're able to really find those attendees who are in a contracted hotel but outside their contracted room block. And they were told by the hotels that if the attendees book through online travel agencies such as Priceline and Expedia, that those rooms will not count towards their room block. So she's asking, does this sound right? And after all, how else are people supposed to book rooms if they're not going through those online travel agencies?
Right. Again, I think to my previous point, that's part of your upfront contract negotiations. And you want it to be explicit in your clause that it doesn't matter what mechanism the room was booked. If they're an attendee of your meeting, you're getting credit for that. So that's one of the ways. I'm not sure what you mean by how are they supposed to book. Obviously, you're working with your housing company. If you are suggesting after cutoff, I think that's to the point we discussed earlier that Shimo gave some great ideas about after the 30-day cutoff, and I think we're going to see more and more of that come out.
And attendees not only book through the online travel agencies, but they're calling the brands directly and using the brand's website, whether that Marriott, Hyatt, so they're booking and shopping, if you will, directly to the hotels, and that's one of the big ways in which attendees could be booking their rooms.
Yes.
So I think that we have gone through a lot of the questions, and I think we are right on time in terms of covering off on this month's webinar. I want to thank you, Lisa, for being a wealth of information, and again appreciate you taking the time out right before you're leaving for your annual to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, and I hope you'll join us for our next webinar next month, and you'll receive some information about that along with your CNP certificate. Thank you again, and have a great day.